Hey guys, it's Madison Estes. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing the horror comic In, based on the Stephen King short story of the same name. This was scripted by Mark Guggenheim and illustrated by Alex Maleev. This story is about a cursed field, Ackerman's field, that contains 7, or is it 8, stones, which may or may not be the only thing containing eldritch abominations that could destroy the entire world. Someone who knows about the curse must go into the field and touch the stones in order to maintain their fixedness so that these monsters can't escape into our world. So I want to start off by saying that there was a lot of Lovecraftian influences in this story, and it definitely fulfilled all of my cosmic horror expectations. And I really enjoyed the first half of this story. The first guy, Nathan, I think his story was the best. We're introduced to him whenever his therapist sister is writing a letter to someone talking about how she doesn't think that her brother's death was an accident. She thinks it was a suicide. So right off the bat we know that Nathan's therapist has killed himself. Doesn't look like a really good sign for Nathan, honestly. The next few sections in the comic revolve around Nathan and his experience whenever he first encountered the field, and it talks about how he became obsessed whenever he noticed that the number of rocks that he counted in the picture was different than the number of rocks that he saw with his own eyes. After Nathan touches all of the rocks, there are 8. Nathan then becomes obsessed with touching the rocks and making the numbers fixed in order to create stability. It seems as though he's afraid that if he doesn't do this, something bad will happen. He sees a monster as he leaves, and it's hinted at that if he doesn't continue to return to the field and touch the rocks in order to keep them fixed, that several monsters will escape and apparently destroy the earth. Nathan goes back and forth between believing that he has OCD and believing that he truly needs to touch the stones in order to keep the monsters at bay. This is when he begins seeing Johnny, the therapist who kills himself. It seems as though the knowledge of the monsters and going to Ackerman's field to touch rocks is such a massive responsibility, right? Like, it's so terrible that it causes people to go insane and kill themselves. And this happens several times throughout the story. Now, it's a really interesting concept. I love stories about eldritch locations, eldritch monsters, and forbidden knowledge that makes men go insane. And this has all of those things. I do just kind of wish that the whole forbidden knowledge that makes men go insane part hadn't just completely consumed the story. I would have liked a little bit more information about the rocks and the monsters. And honestly, I would have liked it if every single time a new person kind of inherited the burden or inherited the curse, whatever it is, I really wish that they had tried a new way to try to escape it each time. Think Final Destination 2 whenever they did the whole new life defeats death. Now, I think later on they ended up retconning that, but still, I appreciated that they tried to do something different with that movie instead of recycling the same storyline over and over again like every other Final Destination movie. But that's what I would have liked to have seen in this story, but like the Final Destination franchise, it seemed that we kept seeing the exact same pattern repeat over and over again, and honestly, it got old fast. One of my main issues with this story is the fact that the characters kept dying so quickly, or we would be introduced to a character that we knew was going to die later on, that I had trouble getting attached to any of the characters because, I just knew that they were going to die, and there wasn't a whole lot of suspense either because you know what's going to happen to them. Now, there are times when it's effective. There are times when it feels like you are reading the long, drawn-out suicide letter of a man slowly being driven mad, and it is creepy and haunting. But at some point it just becomes so repetitive that it almost becomes comical. Like, you're just like, oh my god, here we go with those frickin' stones again. I thought it was cool that the first woman, Miss Acker, was able to keep shit locked down for at least 6 decades, and all these little wussy men couldn't handle it for even 1 year. Apparently Miss Acker was a badass, even when she looked like she was 100 years old and could really use a nap. I'm sorry, but if a little old lady could scoot her butt up that hill and touch those rocks every time she needed to in order to keep the world safe, you lame asses could have lasted at least a couple years. Losers! Anyway, the biggest disappointment for me was the ending. I thought it was leading up to something big, I thought it was going to be something apocalyptic, and I guess the ending was supposed to be shocking, but honestly it just kind of confused me, and it troubled me for 2 reasons. First of all, the idea of having multiple people know about the rocks doesn't seem like a bad idea. As I said earlier, if you know that you're cursed, try something that the person before you didn't try in order to make yourself uncursed, or less cursed. I mean, if only one person has to go up there and touch the stones, couldn't they, take turns? And wouldn't that be a lot less stressful if you knew that you weren't, the only person in the world keeping everything in balance if you had multiple people to share the responsibility with? I mean, wouldn't it not be that bad if you only had to go up there once every couple years? Now, it might not work like that. Maybe once more people know about the stones, the responsibility falls on every single person to show up every single time and keep touching the stones in order to keep the monsters at bay. I don't know, but neither does the character, and the actions that the character takes don't really make sense with the lack of information that we have. He just kind of makes some crazy assumptions about what he has to do, and it doesn't really fit for me. It just doesn't work. The ending doesn't feel shocking as much as it feels gratuitously violent and confusing. And I have no problem with gratuitous violence, but it just felt like it was just a shock ending in order to give this story some resolution that it didn't have. So I was just a little bit disappointed with the ending, and I just kind of felt confused by the character's decision. I guess I was just expecting that we were going to get an ending where, like, all hell breaks loose, or we finally find someone that's able to, like, handle the responsibility and everything was going to be fine and wrapped up in a bow. I don't know, I just didn't feel like the ending gave enough resolution, and honestly it left me with more questions than answers, but not in a good way. More in a, why did any of the characters do any of the things that they did in this story if the solution was just so simple? I don't know. On to the artwork. The artwork is fantastic. It really blurs the line between realism and comic art sometimes, and I really enjoyed the way that they integrated the documentation that was in the short story into the comic itself. You have letters, you have, official looking files, you have newspaper clippings. It's really interesting how they were able to integrate all of that into the comic. The monsters are cool. There's some really pretty images of the field at sunset, and like there's faces that are carved into the stone. It's a lot more colorful than it needed to be, but it's dark enough to be ominous at the right times. And there's incredible attention to detail throughout. They really didn't skimp on the illustrations at all. I give the artwork in this comic 4.5 out of 5 stars. I give this story 3 out of 5 stars. I know I complained about it a lot. Like, a lot. But that's mostly because I wanted a big apocalyptic ending, or I wanted like one of the characters to overcome the curse somehow, or like restore order once and for all. I don't know. I just wanted more resolution, basically. So I want to know how Miss Acker did it. That's what I really want to know. That's the true mystery here. Forget these eldritch abominations. The true mystery is how this old woman was able to stay such a badass. Even with her age, even with her arthritis and her bad hip and her shaky hands, she still managed to get her butt up there and do what needed to be done. All those little boys should have took a lesson from her, because she is one of the coolest characters ever. I hope that I can be that sprung and that freaking just athletic and amazing whenever I'm her age. Anyway, so the story still gets 3 out of 5 stars because I really enjoyed the premise. I thought that it was creepy and thought-provoking and overall pretty good. So between the art and the story, I give this horror comic 3.5 out of 5 stars. When you average the art score with the story score, that might not make sense mathematically, but it makes sense in my heart. But if you touch the final rating, maybe it'll actually be 4. I don't know, maybe if you take a picture of it, it'll actually be 3. Maybe if you compare the two, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't. It's 3.5, just leave it alone. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe. On this channel, I post reviews, writing advice, horror commentary, and vlogs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.